Hi, we have some special guests today where we're going to focus on the problem of opioid addiction in the community. With Al and I are Amy Leone from the Juvenile Advocacy Group and Community Impact, Katie Truitt, and her daughter Meghan Giacomuzzi. Guys, let's talk about, you have a fundraiser coming up in September.
We do.
Yes, it's called the Missing Matt Walk, where it's our first annual walk. We are going to have it every year. It's September 12th. It's starting at the Milford Park at the bandstand. I lost my brother to a heroin overdose November 3rd of 2012, and since then I've been burying friend after friend after friend, and on our way back from one of my close friends' wake, I said to my mom that we needed to do something, because not only is there a terrible stereotype about heroin addicts, it's just happening too much, and kids are dying. And so I started Missing Matt as a Facebook group. It has almost 500 members, and so we decided to call it that, and we decided to have a walk to raise awareness about what's going on in the community and what we can do to stop this epidemic. I'm a heroin addict in recovery. There's many different ways to recover. There isn't one set way. There aren't certain rules to follow. And I feel like a lot of heroin addicts are afraid to come out and say they need help because they're afraid they're going to be discriminated against. They're afraid they're going to lose their jobs or lose their
jail.
Exactly. And you know, a heroin addict is not a bum on the side of a dumpster. I came from a good home in a very small town of Hopedale, grew up in a nice house. You know, I graduated high school with honors. I went to college. You know, I did all the right things. I grew up with a stepfather who's, you know, he was a police officer for 30 years, you know, and the drug agent, and telling me drugs are bad, drugs kill you, and I still became a heroin addict.
And your brother died from it.
And my brother died from it, and it's not because we're bad people. No. I'm not a loser or a bum or a criminal. I'm a person with a sick, deadly disease that doesn't have a cure. And, you know, unless this community comes together and, you know, raises awareness and changes this stigma, kids are going to continue to die. And I don't think that another family should have to go through what mine lives with every day. Mm-hmm. And my brother, you know, he was amazing, and you know, things need to change. And, you know, the overdose rate has quadrupled in the last 14 years. So the treatment needs to quadruple.
Katie, this must be awfully hard for you, losing a son and having a daughter who was an addict as well. How have you coped with this?
Well, living with the pain it's unbearable, and that's what you do. You learn to live with this pain, and there's no getting away from it. But what helps is doing what we're doing, having a voice around this, talking about this. Our mission is to be visible, to be heard, to stand up and say, this isn't about shame. This isn't something, these are not bad people. I'm not a bad parent because I have 3 children and 2 of them are heroin addicts. Lost my son, my daughter's in recovery. I'm not a bad parent. parents and family members, you know, they feel in shame and they feel judged. They have nowhere to turn. People suffering, same thing. They have nowhere to turn. Things are swept under the rug. Things are not addressed. Things are ignored. And Matt's story is so compelling because it involves every single one of those things. The shame, the judgment. Let's not talk about this because this isn't really happening. And Matt is that kid that grew up, as Meghan said, in a great town. You know, in the small town of Hopedale where nothing bad ever happens. Went to school here in Milford when he started the 8th grade, was on Pop Warner. All of those things. My son is your son or daughter, growing up the exact same way, and yet he suffered from a disease, and he fought that disease by himself, and this disease cannot be fought alone. Parents can't do this alone. People who suffer cannot do this alone. And that's why it's so important to stop talking about this behind closed doors. And let's get out there and let's wear shirts and let's walk down Main Street and say, hey, we're here, we're not ashamed, we want to do something. I am proud to say I have 2 children that suffer from this disease because they're both doing something. That story is going to make a difference.
I think what people need to realize, we had Chief O'Loughlin on a few weeks ago, and he said he was visiting West Virginia, where his wife is from. And the problem is the same there. I think people have to get rid of the idea this is only in Milford or only in Hopedale. It's everywhere today.
It's
everywhere.
And Amy, you've been on the treatment front for as long as I've known you, at least 7 or 8 years, and I know you've done it before then.
And I think, like you had just said, that it's not just here. I mean, one of the biggest things that we've started to see, and we're calling this whole bringing awareness to shine the bright light, we've actually started working with the town of Franklin, with Representative Roy and, you know, Representative Fernandez with our JAG coalition and the hospital, and looking at all of the communities to really join forces together and address it as a collaboration, as a network, because we are all having the same problem. There are deaths every day in different communities or overdoses, and from a treatment perspective, that, you know, I have parents and kids, you know, young adults calling every day needing to get into treatment, or desperate parents, what do I do, where do I turn, how do I get help, where do we go? And it's really getting worse and worse, but, you know, it's all about us joining together and making a difference, because just like Katie said, one parent can't do it alone, one therapist can't do it alone either. There needs to be a whole group of us that are working together.
Well, it would seem to me, and having been involved in education, and I was on the school committee and a bunch of things, one of the first things that's very difficult is for people to admit there's a problem.
Right.
And what you're doing seems to be a very good step to bring it, as you say, into the light, so people acknowledge that it's not just something that happens in an alley someplace.
Right.
It's
Right.
happening right in front of them, and parents need to acknowledge that it is an issue.
That's right.
And I'll tell you, I have 3 boys in their early 20s, and every day I get up and thank God they're not involved in drugs. I consider myself lucky because of that.
And that's
in
why we
today's
want to get
environment.
rid of the stigma as well, the stereotype that a heroin addict is not a bad person, is not, you know, just a gang member or somebody off the streets. It can be anybody, and it is anybody. Chief O'Loughlin said it best. He said to me, somebody asked me what a heroin addict looked like, and I told them to look in the mirror, and he's absolutely correct. Because to look at somebody, you know, you would say that they look like a normal person. Well, we are normal people.
Right.
We just have a disease.
That's right.
Well, one of the
Good
things
people.
that Chief O'Loughlin talked about when he was here was opioids, that they are prescribed like candy. And his comment was, you know, that's one of the first steps, is that kids get opioids, you know, and then and then they move to the next step because it's
It's cheaper.
Well, and you know, part of Matt's story too is I feel very strongly about educating parents to look for things when kids are very young. Matthew started smoking marijuana in the 8th grade.
Yeah.
I was shocked. I was dumbfounded. I was in denial. I was the mom that said, well, I guess all kids are doing this. And that's not true. It's not true. I mean, it can be a gateway drug. And then it's a disease of progression.
Well, the marijuana that was available when I was in college
not the
is
It's not the same.
totally
It's
different.
not
This
the
is
same.
5 times more powerful.
Keep going.
You
Yeah,
talked
no.
you talked to Matt's best friend that he grew up with in Hopedale, and he said to me one day, he said, you know, Katie, this must be a disease because I did everything Matt did, except I could stop, and Matt couldn't.
Well, that's exactly the case.
And Matt lived his life. People that he worked with never knew. His best friend never knew.
His family never knew.
I did not know.
You know, I think the thing, like you said, the opioids, this epidemic, I mean, I believe it happened when they took the OxyContin off the street. The FDA manufactures it in a way that it can't be used recreationally. It can't be
The gel.
broken down. It's like
Right.
a hard gel form, and it can only be swallowed. And so people who were already addicted to this drug went to, you know,
The cheapest
the
alternative.
cheapest and the
They went to
available.
Perk
It's available.
30s, and then
Yeah,
it
the
went
Perk
straight
30.
to heroin because
Right.
the Perk 30s were too expensive once
Right.
you were
Well,
had too many.
The dilemma is that the average parent, the average parent that's got 3 kids or 2 kids in high school or whatever, has never touched and felt the death of someone who dies from an overdose. They've never seen it.
Well,
They've
now
never
they're starting
experienced it. And that's the scary part. When I was in the service, I had to deal with that kind of stuff. And it's a scary, scary thing to see someone die of an overdose or to be there after they've died of an overdose. It's a horrific thing to see.
and it's happening every day.
And people don't see that. They're not exposed to it.
Well, and it's tragic to lose a child. It's
Without
not
question.
supposed to happen.
That's crazy.
It's tragic. Losing a child to a heroin overdose, there's so much before that.
Right.
There's so much pain, anguish. I can't even tell you in words what you go through, the
There's
long
no
journey that we've
explanation,
had,
right.
and then to end that way.
Yeah, you fight the fight
Right.
and you lose.
And you lose.
And that's, and for a parent, that's, there's just nothing worse than that, to lose the battle.
And unlike me, my brother never had a chance at recovery.
No, that's what's so
Because
sad.
it wasn't spoke about. His pain was hidden. He had to live up to this image of himself he had in his head to be socially accepted in society. And he looked perfect on the outside. He drove a brand new car. He dressed the best. He was an anesthesia tech. You know, he looked perfect. And he was a heroin addict, and he was suffering in silence. And it's the ones that suffer in silence, I think, that are the ones that are dying.
Or the ones that are told, by uneducated or parents that are in denial, just stop doing what you're doing. I think that is probably the most damaging words you can say to someone whose body is physically addicted and cannot stop doing what they're doing. And to be told, just stop doing what you're doing.
It has to be brought to the same spot that alcoholism is. Alcoholism is the same kind. After years and years and years, if you're a recovering alcoholic, that's a great thing because you've gone through the 12-step program. Addiction to a drug, it's got to be the same way. It's got to be.
I have gone through a 12-step program.
And it's got to be set up on the table, and people have to say, "This is a good thing."
And
And I
this
think
is your
that-
area, so
Yeah, and I
let's
think
hear
that-
from you on this.
When you talk, there's a lot of people, and Meghan said it, there's not one way to go through recovery, and there's a lot of philosophy that AA, alcoholics
Right.
are very different from an opiate addict or a drug addict, but the reality is that we all, even myself who's not in recovery from a substance, has that mental obsession. I can obsess about something and have that same addictive quality, whether it be control or perfectionism, just as a drug addict does, but I don't have that solution that the alcoholic or the drug addict has. Somebody who is, eats or diets or has an eating disorder has that same thing. So I think educating it as it's in every one of us. It's just a matter of how do we deal with it.
And addictive personality.
Right.
And
It's without question.
It's so important for parents to understand that too, because of the way we are affected as a parent. I suffer from the disease of addiction because I'm addicted to the addicts in my life. My solution is to control, manipulate, try to fix. They're 2 years old, they run around, they fall down, you pick them up. When they're 22 and they're using heroin or they're using drugs, they're doing something that is heart-wrenching, you want to pick them up. That's what I suffer from.
And the dilemma is that that's probably not the right thing to do.
No, it's not.
And it's hard to hold back. And I meet with tons of parents of what do I do? And I'm just going to send them to this place, or I'm just going to do this. And you pushing them, they need to own their own recovery. They need to decide what path they're going to take. It's not going to be, may not be what you want, but they need to figure this out for themselves.
Well, it's interesting. I have very close family relatives who have been recovering alcoholics for years and years and years. Now, I didn't know they were alcoholics until they went to the spot where they had to confess that they were alcoholics. And he's been involved with Alcoholics Anonymous for years. And his comment is the person has to take ownership, and they have to find the lowest spot before they can climb out.
Well, and I always say when you're sick and tired of being sick and tired,
Right.
you'll finally decide what to do.
But as a parent, that's what we prevent from happening.
Right. Because
And that is the hardest
Enabling.
thing.
Enable, yep.
We don't allow that to happen.
That's why-
And
We're in the age of helicopter parents.
Right.
so-
exactly. And
you know.
parents that I'm in recovery, and I see the difference of what how I am now and how I used to be, and that desperate need to change someone else's behavior is overwhelming because it's driven by fear and it's driven by shame.
And the other piece of the puzzle is there's an anger there. The anger you have that your child didn't turn out the way you wanted them to. So there's an ownership that you take that and you go, I'm angry because they're supposed to be this way.
Well,
disappointed.
society tells me to have shame.
Yeah, and
because
so what happens is
my child didn't go-
and so what happens
Right.
is that's a piece of anger that
Yes.
you have, and you have to shed that. You have to.
The
you have to-
resentment.
Well, that's
The
what keeps us
resentment.
Yeah.
quiet too.
Yeah.
Because if I tell you I have children that are heroin addicts, that your response is going to be, what did you do wrong?
It only takes 2 or 3 years of counseling to get to the point where you can at least accept that. So
Lifetimes.
just to
But
acknowledge it.
I mean, I look at it from the opioid issue. I was having a dental implant put in last year, and the doctor's willing to prescribe everything from OxyContin, Vicodin, Percocet, and I'm going, no, thank you, I'll take aspirin.
Yeah.
I had heart surgery in 2006, and I was prescribed OxyContin. And to this day, I remember I took one of the pills, and 18 hours of my life vanished. And my then wife and my children told me I was awake and staring, and they couldn't even connect with me. And I said, boy, if one of these does that, I got rid of the rest of them.
And I think one of the things is, our collaboration with JAG and with the Milford Regional Medical Center in the emergency room and doing all of the things that we've been doing on the opioids and the substance abuse and treatment is, we're doing so many things on the behavioral health perspective, but, in a personal situation, we just had an issue, went to the doctors, and my significant other was he's in recovery, and, the doctor knows that, but was gonna give him more medication, and said, couldn't even believe, he was like, I'm in recovery.
You can't do that.
And 5 minutes later said, what are we gonna do for pain management? And it was like within seconds, he didn't even register.
right.
That's right.
And-
They're so geared at giving
Absolutely.
You know, and I
pills
said,
out.
It's all about money.
well, and I said it
Well-
was so simple
Yeah.
of change the color font on the computer. If somebody's medical history says that they are
In
recovering
That's right.
from an addiction, put them in red. Nobody needs to know because the doctor does not have time to read the whole medical history.
Right.
But if it was there, just as we do with the DEA, every time a script is written, you have that database so that you can see if they're drug seeking or drug shopping. The dentist, the primary cares, we need to know because they could be going right in there for the same exact thing. It could be as simple as changing a font to make everybody aware of what's going on. There's no time. We're rushed as physicians. We are rushed within time. I see clients back to back to back for 12 hours straight. And if I was prescribing medication, I would want to make sure that something notified me right away
Stands out.
if I didn't know.
Well,
Because
what I think is interesting is I have a heart condition. When I go to see a dentist, I get inundated with, did you take your pre-meds?
That's right.
I get a phone call. They ask me at the door. Okay, and I've asked them to put it on the chart. Don't prescribe me this garbage.
That's right.
Right.
I would rather take a plain aspirin or deal with the pain.
Yeah.
I'm actually shocked at the amount of doctors that have very little knowledge about addiction to begin with. And, you know, part of Matt's story is at one time he was taking Suboxone. He was getting Suboxone from a primary care doctor, and then another doctor was a geriatric specialist. These doctors, in order to get a license to prescribe, they only have to take an 8-hour course online to get that license.
Well,
I actually went, after Matthew had passed, I went to one of these doctors' offices. I wanted to talk to the doctor. And I sat there in a room full of very, very sad, drug-addicted people. And the doctor wouldn't come out and talk to me. He never came out to talk
Well,
to
not
me.
that I'm accusing doctors, but let's not forget, they get incentives
Well,
from the
they-
drug companies
Yes.
Absolutely.
based on I have a sister who's a psychiatrist who
Yes.
told me
But
point blank,
It,
when a new drug comes out, they get incentives to prescribe
Mm-hmm.
them.
it needs to change because you can't hand someone even a pill that will work and leave it at that.
Right.
Because you can't say to someone, okay, take this pill, now go play in the same sandbox you've been playing in. There needs to be a lifestyle change.
Or take these
Same
pills for 2 months while your broken ankle heals, and then get back on the sports field and not make any attempt to deal with what happens at the end of taking those pills.
And I think that that's something that the new Stop Addiction, the governor's bill, and some of the requirements is going to address doctors that are in school and, you know, to take more classes on substance
Yes.
abuse and addiction and
Yes.
the medications. And I think, you know, as we talk about the lifestyle change, and really it's not just about taking Suboxone or taking the Vivitrol shot and things like that, it's finding that correct place for the person to go to. You know, what type of program, whether it's a day program or it's getting the Vivitrol shot and there's some follow-up with it. And I think that's what we've kind of all collaborated on is how do we give the people who are in recovery, but also the families, the support that they need in the community.
Because they're just as
What-
sick
yeah.
too.
I think
Right.
I think it's a critical issue, but I think personally, I think a more critical issue is if you think of it as a funnel, and you have people in recovery in the funnel, but in the piece above the funnel, there aren't enough people being put into that. That's the people in the high schools. That's the people in the colleges.
Right,
That's
exactly.
the education to say, as you say, the bright light. Shine light on this so people
Right.
know they need to get into recovery because a lot of people just don't want to accept it, and that's the key
Right.
is to become aware of the guy sitting next to you may be one, and so you don't chastise him. You help
right.
that person get into recovery where they can move away from it.
Well, they have the new recovery high school in Worcester, and my mother and I are members of the Worcester Opioid Task Force that they put together, Joe Early's office. And I didn't even know that there was a recovery high school, never mind 5 in the state. And that's a problem. The community doesn't know because nobody's communicating.
And
that's
first
why,
I've heard of it.
That's
right, there's 5 recovery high schools in the state, and there's a brand new one in opening this September in Worcester. And schools aren't offering this to parents with children that suffer with substance abuse, problems, and it's just, that's why we started Missing Matt, because, we're having this walk so people can come out and talk about this. We're going to offer information, all different types of information on, different treatments, because there isn't one way that works. And, unless we all come together, doctors, teachers, just people of the community, families, everybody needs to be involved for it to work. If the whole community is involved but the doctors aren't on board, it's not going to work. And so that's why we decided to do this walk, because we have to say we're not going to be quiet, because kids are dying. 15-year-olds are dying.
Okay, let's repeat again. When is the walk?
The walk is September 12th.
And what do people have to do who want to participate?
They have to go to the website. It's www.missingmatt.myevent.com.
It's Missin with no J.
Missin with no G.
MISSIN.
MATT.myevent.com.
Okay.
And they can register for the walk there.
Is there a fee to register?
It's $25, yes.
Okay.
But if, for people that, if they can't afford that, they can always contact me. Just show up.
Just show up.
Okay,
Just-
and the walk starts where?
It starts at the Milford Town Park over by the bandstand. At 11, we're going to be having speakers and informational tables with all sorts of information. We're giving out information. JAG will be there. Well, Community Impact will be there.
And where does the walk go to?
We're going to go right down Main Street.
We're working on getting the route done.
We have the route in our head, but we're going to map it out. But
And it's sort of like, we're here, deal with it?
we're here.
Yes,
We're here. We're not
yes,
going
good
away.
description. We were first told we could only do it on the bike path.
Well, I remember
And-
years and years ago when the first Gay Pride Parade was, it was we're here, we're queer, deal with it.
Right?
So,
Well, it
And
was,
look how far they've come.
well, and it was one of the things when we had talked about it, and Katie and Meghan had said they had to go on the bike path, and I was like, well, we do the crop walk for hunger.
Right
This
down
is
Main
the
Street.
same thing. We should be doing the same
Right,
thing
so-
and bring
'cause
awareness
I
about
noticed the
this.
selectmen haven't yet approved a route, so I assume you haven't submitted
Well,
it.
Not yet.
Amy's the voice we've been lacking.
Well, I
because we didn't know
actually
what
did
we were
speak
doing.
to the
Parks Commission.
Parks Commission
to get
today,
approval for
and everybody in the town has been 100% supportive. The chief, the whole Milford Police Department, the selectmen, the people I've had to talk to have been, absolutely wonderful, and whatever we need, they're going to.
I think people are beginning to realize it's an everyday problem, not what the typical, as you guys said, the bum in the alley or
Right.
the jazz musician who, shoots up
And,
before
on
a
a
set.
personal note, I've heard people say things like, there was so much more to Matt than
that,
being a
right.
heroin addict. And I thought, oh my God, you have no idea how
Right.
much there is to Matt than that. But Matt's voice now, we're his voice now to help someone else, because that's what Matt was about.
Helping other people.
He was always about helping other people, and
Okay.
that's what this is about.
Okay, well, it seems like a good place to wrap up this episode. Just let our viewers know we are going to have a second episode with the same guests to continue this topic.